Y'all what'd you say? Thank you, yeah, no. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Good afternoon. It really is a pleasure to be back here in Forrest City. Honored to be with so many cool and great colleagues from around the state today. So have you all enjoyed your day? Good, good. Have you been filling up your notebooks like I have? A lot of thanks, tremendous thanks to Rachel and the team, for our friends at Arkansas Historic Preservation Program, for everybody at Preserve Arkansas. It's been a great day, and I appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you. My name is Ryan Biles. I'm an architect. I'm based in historic downtown Lonoke. That's my hometown, where Natalie, my wife, and I are raising our 3 boys. Go Jackrabbits. Natalie is an interior designer. She's principal of Shine Interior Design Studio in Lonoke, where she practices with her partner Stacy Brazil. If anybody here is actually from Forrest City, Stacy's husband Justin is at Forrest City Family Pharmacy here in town. That's where he practices. They work on commercial and residential projects statewide. I'm a 2003 graduate from Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design, where I met my wife Natalie, and also the McGuire's son Sam was my roommate in Mexico, and we spent 5 years together in school, so that's pretty cool that things come full circle. So good to see you all today. So I began my career during school, working for one of the larger firms in the state. I spent 19 years and 7 months there before I launched my own practice in January of 2020. My practice is called Kudzu Collective. We're focused on adaptive reuse projects throughout the Delta and the Mid-South. So I'm really excited today to share with y'all a little bit about one of the projects that we're tremendously proud of there in our hometown of Lonoke. This is the Grumpy Rabbit American Eatery. I want to appreciate Rachel for recognizing the impact that this restaurant has had on our town and inviting me to come speak about it. So this project is at 105 Front Street, downtown Lonoke. So our story here starts with a very common scenario that I'm sure many of y'all have experienced in your community. An underutilized building in a rural downtown, 5,000 available square feet, sitting behind darkened windows. That's a pretty familiar scene to some of y'all, probably, if you're here today. In fact, there's probably a building on your main street that you've been thinking of throughout the day in your hometown that may have come to mind as we're talking about the conditions of some of these structures. So this photo is actually from Google Street View in 2015. At the time, the first floor was housing a flea market, subdivided into a couple other spaces. The upper floor was empty. This is the space on the left, by the way, in the photograph. So again, pretty common story in most of our communities. So a few business concepts and ideas later, this space was again empty with a leaking roof and vines growing up the back wall. The building was really crying out for creativity and crying out for life. So when you think about historic buildings in downtown contexts like these buildings are essentially, I would say, a blank canvas for creative pursuit. This adaptability of these buildings is by design. These places contain the possibility for a creative entrepreneur, an artist, an adventure tourism entrepreneur. I just use that because Martin's got me thinking about all this exciting stuff going on in the Delta. These places are ideal for housing businesses and opportunities such as these. I will point out, Lonoke is not in an opportunity zone, and that is an interesting fact as we've been learning about today. That's a tool in the toolbox that many of us need to be thinking about. What about a chef? Someone who's going to bring ideas, that's going to fill a need, serve the community. If done with excellence, a project like this could even be a catalyst for bringing a community back to life. So that's where my friend Gina Winterlack found herself. She had an idea. She spent some time observing what was going on in Lonoke. Because you see, in addition to the built context that you see here in this fabric in downtown, Lonoke as a community of citizens was engaged in an ongoing community conversation about how to create a visible and attractive and connected town. Since 2016, this respectful and inclusive conversation about how we can implement ideas for improvements from within had been building. So thanks to support from our friends at the University of Central Arkansas Center for Community and Economic Development, Amy Whitehead, Shelby Fiegel, Dylan Edgel, and their team, This effort was in full force by late 2019, and this is a conversation that our friend Gina had been observing in our community. Fellow architect, colleague in Helena, Amos Eckerson, a guy I really enjoy learning from and visiting with, he has a term. He says, and I'm going to quote from a work that he did. This process that we're talking about, this community conversation, Amos says the technical term for this is asset-based community development. But I like to think of it more like counting your blessings. And I love that visual that he's using, that terminology. Lonoke was doing just that. As we were evaluating our town's options, or opportunities to be leveraged, to generate something fresh and new, something new to invest in, using elements that have always been there, an asset-based approach, that the time was right. And these things are right there in front of us. This asset-based approach, or blessing-based approach, if you will, Lonoke had concentrated on several areas of improvement. Downtown revitalization was one of them. So Gina was born and raised in Lonoke, and after building a career in Memphis, chose to move back a few years ago, re-engage in the community that she loves so much. After moving back, she took time to observe this conversation that was occurring, the people who were making these moves, these key investments in the community, and she decided there was a particular building in downtown Lonoke that would be the perfect canvas for a really cool, beautiful idea that she had, and that was a destination restaurant. You see, she's known for her hospitality. She loves to cook. She loves to serve others, which is not the best reason to start a restaurant. But what I like to tell people is that Gina loved to serve people so much, but because her kitchen at home wasn't big enough, she decided to build a restaurant so she could serve the whole town. So she did. So in this vision, Gina saw a vision at one particular building, 105 Front Street, Southwest, in downtown Lonoke. She believed that she could create a place where that dream could come alive. So it starts to get exciting here at this point. In 2020, Natalie and I met with Gina. We walked through the building with her. When you think about this, as a designer, what a huge privilege it is to walk through a building that occupied such a significant place in downtown Lonoke. This building was designed by Charles Thompson. It was built in 1905, so this significance was not lost on us as architects and designers. We love these old buildings, and we see the opportunity that Gina saw. We believed it would be a catalyst. This handsome brick structure was originally constructed, as I said, designed by Charles L Thompson. And interestingly, y'all may be aware of this, but a lot of Charles Thompson's work is found in the town of Lonoke at a relatively high concentration, particularly residential, but some commercial structures as well. A lot of them listed on the National Register of Historic Places. So if you are interested, you do make trips to Little Rock, it's worth stopping in. The Museum of Lonoke County has a walking tour of these historic homes. Again, many of them Charles Thompson designed. And there's a brochure. You pick one up, and I think you'd enjoy that. So this building was known as the Historic Eagle Building. It has a twin, as you can tell, right next door to the west, which is the neighboring D.R. Boone Building. They remain structurally connected, but they're separate properties. So both properties have been utilized over history and over time for various commercial purposes in the last 115 years. And if you're working on a Charles Thompson building, it's a lot of fun because the State House Museum has all of his drawings online. So you can access them in high quality and be able to do some really cool research like that. So that was a benefit and a blessing to getting to work on that. Interestingly enough, there's only about 5 sheets of drawings for the whole project, which is, of course, not what we would do today, but it's amazing how much you could accomplish with the simplicity and the beauty of the craft that Charles Thompson created in these drawing sets, as you can see here. So this is a completely open, it was originally constructed with a completely open 25-foot by 100-foot footprint. And over the last several decades, as we were kind of seeing, the space had several layers of low-impact interior renovations within the walls that had since become worn and deteriorated. The building is listed individually on the National Register of Historic Places. It was placed there in 1994. the historic district of Lonoke is also within an historic district. So it's both within the listed district and individually listed. The application elaboration on the 1994 application to the National Register has a building description that reads this way. It says, the building is designed to house 2 separate businesses, although the storefronts and the inscription stones are different on the front or north elevation. The Joe P. Eagle building section here comprises the eastern half of the building and is virtually unaltered. On the exterior, a short stuccoed bulkhead, and we'll come back to that in a minute, supports a wood frame storefront and large plate glass windows, each with a 2-pane transom and a centralized single leaf entrance, which you can see right there. 2 of the windows recede inward and abut the door framing, and the door that appears to be historic is almost fully glazed and capped by a delicate dentil course above in a single pane transom. Both storefronts are outlined by 3 brick pilasters with curved brick edges and on the side adjacent to the storefront, and originally an egg and dart terracotta molding was at the top of the capitals for the pilasters. Only the eastern pilaster, however, is still present. The storefronts crowned by an entablature and an unusual vertical groove frieze, which is what you're seeing in the photograph to the left. So we're very lucky that these primary elements that are described in that National Register listing still remain and still in existence. They remain relatively unaltered when Gina began her stewardship of this historic structure. Photographs you're seeing here are the first floor looking back towards the front on the left, back towards the back on the right, and in the middle, the second floor, front to back, you can tell, completely open. So some demolition has occurred in this photograph because, again, as you were seeing about 6 years ago, there had been some improvements on the interior that have been removed, non-historic material. So it's exciting for us as architects and designers because her vision was so clear, but it was really adaptable, and we were privileged to be part of the conversation from the beginning. So like any good cook, Gina was working from a great recipe. So there's 3 key ingredients in that recipe for success for the project, and I want to talk to you about those today. See, the possibility existed for to add these 3 ingredients. She was able to transform that possibility into a real opportunity. The back of the building there is what you're seeing, the alley side. The door in the middle originally held the 2 doors you see on the left, which were found on the interior of the building. That's a really interesting fact because we were able to use those doors later to pattern new interior doors that we used elsewhere inside the structure. So Gina's 3 ingredients to success. First ingredient is that she built her team. Right off the bat, she contacted us. She asked if we would be interested in working with her on the project, and of course, with our passion, our interest, and our love for our hometown and downtowns throughout the region, and our passion for old buildings, we of course enthusiastically said yes. It's really a privilege to be invited into that process. So we enlisted Natalie and her partner Stacy there, and then we enlisted the expertise of landscape architect Brantley Snipes of Greenwood, Mississippi, who is also the executive director of Main Street Greenwood, to design the unique outdoor space, the landscape furnishings, and planters. And also Will Staley and Sarah Melby of Thrive Incorporated as the branding strategy consultant. Amber Jones, who you heard from today, was our historic preservation tax credit consultant. Gina built her team with architects and designers. Very shortly thereafter, we introduced her to Amber. She loved the possibility of utilizing the historic preservation or the historic tax credits as a key tool to empower the project's progress. So she was open to that. We made the introduction. Amber was really able to come in, and she's provided tremendously important advisory capacity and service as Gina chose to pursue these tax credits. Her expertise and her connections, Amber's, with the reviewers at both the state and the federal level were really invaluable in creating a successful project here. So from the beginning, Gina's idea was to build a destination restaurant with an inviting and exciting dynamic. A unique restaurant environment right here in her hometown. So you're probably all thinking, a restaurant is kind of a risky business, right? And that's true, statistically. Early on, Gina was willing to listen to good advice about how to make the effort work. One suggestion we brought to the table was to engage with the Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center, which we have a branch of nearby in Little Rock. Of course, they're around the state. They're on campus at ASU Mid-South in West Memphis, ASU Jonesboro, and elsewhere. I believe UA Monticello and others. Gina began conversations with Whitney Horton and her team there at ASBTDC, worked with Whitney's team to build her business plan and assemble the elements of a successful restaurant. So when you think about it, the elements of a successful restaurant hinge on three very key factors: quality of the food, quality of the service, and quality of the experience. And that last one, of course, is what we want to emphasize here, but it's primarily because that's what makes people drive the extra 4 minutes off of the interstate into your historic downtown instead of eating, for example, at the fast food restaurant by the interstate. People are looking for an experience. You've heard that today. We've discussed that and learned about that. Quality of experience and fundamentally, of course, quality of food. It was discussed really early on that a chef-driven concept would be the key element to the Grumpy Rabbit American Eatery. So Gina brought in an advisor to provide early phase kitchen guidance, layout guidance. Ultimately, she hired Chef James Hale, who was a James Beard Award finalist. He founded Acadia Restaurant in Little Rock a number of years back and was most recently at the Capitol Grill until the pandemic paused operations at Capitol Hotel in Little Rock. So Gina brought James on. She made sure to bring on board a chef who was an artist. She brought on board a team of customer service experts who ensured that the quality of service would be exceptional. And so when we're talking about this quality of experience, that's really where the element of design becomes important. Because as architects and as interior designers, our team is concerned with the design of the environment in which the diners are going to be experiencing her hospitality, right? So when you think about it, the experience begins before they ever enter the doors. Anyone carrying one of these around in your pocket? So do you ever do a little research before you try something new? Almost invariably now, right? Where am I going? What's it gonna be like? What's it gonna look like when I get there? So I asked Gina if I could introduce her to my colleagues at Thrive Incorporated in Helena, the nonprofit branding consultancy and graphic design firm founded by Will Staley and again, designer Sarah Melby. Gina chose to engage with Thrive and design a unique, iconic brand that would accompany her vision for a unique, iconic destination restaurant experience in Lonoke. So this was a really fun process because there was a parallel design process that Thrive, the architecture side, the interior design teams worked alongside one another to develop a brand that was uniquely informed by the creative direction in the restaurant design. And then lastly, again, talking about building a team as this ingredient, we introduced Gina to a number of general contractors and to serve as a construction team. Ultimately, she selected Hart Construction of Searcy as the project manager. And here now you see her team coming together, a team of guides, a team of experts. That's the first ingredient to the success for the Grumpy Rabbit project. Ingredient number 2 is to trust the team. Once you build your team, what do you do with them? How you deploy your team requires a level of awareness and a level of clarity. And that's something that Gina was so attentive to. She empowered and she entrusted the team with the things as we that are required as she put the team together. Her ability and her willingness to be decisive was a tremendous benefit throughout the design process, but ultimately she was trusting us to bring creative solutions to the table throughout the process. She understood her vision for the restaurant, and our vision was to make sure that all of the design elements came together in a way that served her vision. So from the perspective of our design team, this was a really fun process, as we would bring in options for lighting, for color, for surfaces, and for textures and materials to the table. Gina would select from these different scenarios and options that Natalie and Stacy and the interiors team would put together, and at the same time, utilize elements at the interior that the interiors team, Will and Sarah, would correlate those things and bring together color and pattern that were consistent with the other elements of the design that were present and in the branding design side, and the messaging strategies that she utilized as she built the anticipation for the restaurant open. All these things were really consistent with the spirit and the nature of the concept that was coming together. So Gina would select from these options, and there would be, an iterative process throughout. She trusted her team, and that's a key ingredient to success. What you're seeing there on the left, if you remember that alley photo that I showed you, the concept was, hey, we need more than one way out of, we talked about emergency egress before. We need more than one way out of this place. We got a lot of folks in here. Well, what was going to just be a utilitarian stair became an opportunity to create a gallery type porch and create balcony seating, which, by the way, is my favorite spot in all of town, because you can go out there on a nice afternoon like today when it's 70 degrees in December for some reason, and look out over the rooftops and just experience a different view that you couldn't have experienced prior to building this. So this was our take on kind of the classic, if you think of around the square in Oxford, Mississippi, the porch dining, this was kind of our take on that. And then you can see as we're installing the modern things that we need, like plumbing and other things that are required. It was a fun process. It was something that we really enjoyed, and it was something that was really a pleasure to engage with Gina in.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
In those photos there, did you keep the wood floor?
Yes, we did.
And you put it back?
So we had to replace some, but everything we could, we kept.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks for asking. That's a great question. So, yeah, that's what you're seeing there. Finally, third ingredient, Gina celebrated her team. So she's a 1977 graduate and was on the Lonoke Women's High School Basketball Championship team of that year. And the banner, by the way, is hanging in the hallway at the Grumpy Rabbit if you want to see that. She's a real cheerleader for her town through and through. She bleeds Jackrabbit purple and Memphis Tigers blue. And naturally, because of her personality and because of her love for people and because of her love for community, she celebrates everything that's important to her. What's really cool in this project is the way that she celebrated the team, that she elevated those around her, the way that she empowered us to serve the project goals and bring the vision to life. So when we kicked off the project, which was funny because there was no groundbreaking because the building was already there, and it was really confusing to the Chamber of Commerce. They're like, well, what do we call it if it's not a groundbreaking? I'm like, I don't know, call it whatever you want, but we're going to celebrate because we're starting this really cool project downtown, So that was kind of fun. And, we started then celebrating what's possible. And then at the end of the process, when we opened the project, it was a celebration, of course, of what had been accomplished, what had been completed. And all those celebrations occurred really before one dish had ever even been served in the restaurant. So, I believe that you must have a spirit of defiant optimism as you go about the work of community development and of project development. And Gina had that ingredient in her recipe, and she brought that to the table as the momentum built. Interestingly, through Sarah Melby's work on the brand design and Thrive's management of the social media channels prior to the launch of the Grumpy Rabbit, before they even opened, they had developed a following of thousands online. So when the doors did open in January 2021, there was an enthusiasm in the community that had spread. And that's because Gina knew how to celebrate her team. So those followers were really ready to go on day one. I think that's part of the joyful audacity of being in a small town, isn't it? It's funny because Natalie and I, we, in the days leading up to the opening, get really intense. You're getting your final sign-offs from the city, all of your permits are getting finalized. In a restaurant, so many different type of furnishings. So you have your installations, there's a swarm of activity. It's fun, it's exhausting, there's a lot of energy going on. So we kind of came to the conclusion that we were just gonna kind of walk away quietly, which is a block and a half from our office, but just kind of walk away quietly, sit back, watch what happens, give it a few days before we go in and try the restaurant. And we were very unsuccessful at that because about lunchtime on the day they opened, on Tuesday, January 19th of this past year, we walked over for lunch. We just couldn't stay away. It's just, why not? We worked on it for so long. Let's go and enjoy that. So the attitude that Gina really brought, and you can see that she's there in the middle, just the excitement, the attitude that she brought to the table, really gave us the confidence that we had something that we could really be proud of being involved in. So that celebration mentality has meant a lot to the city of Lonoke. So let's talk about making an impact. This is the interior of the space, if you remember what it was before, and now you're seeing a design that, using existing elements, but also from non-historic materials, salvaging materials and creating unique furnishings, ledge tables, the feature wall. Lonoke is the goldfish and the baitfish capital of the world. Maybe you didn't know that, but you can go away from the conference having learned something today. And in celebrating that uniqueness, the centerpiece of the restaurant, as you enter the dining room in the front, you see in that feature wall an aquarium that features fish that are grown in Lonoke. But the other side of the aquarium is the backdrop to the bar. So it was a fun design element there that you can kind of see, and the business has, and the business of the restaurant has been a tremendous success. When we're looking at the numbers, the A&P restaurant tax revenues in Lonoke are up 25% year over year for the first 9 months of 2021 compared to the first 9 months of 2020. But if we want to consider 2020 an anomaly because of the pandemic, then we can go back to 2019 and that increase is still 18% in the first 9 months year over year. Monthly average A&P restaurant tax receipts are up 24% over 2020 and 20% over 2019, the first 9 months. So in our small town, that's a really big deal. The Grumpy Rabbit is the only restaurant that was added during that time in the community, so that the increase in tax receipts is, we believe, greatly impacted by the success of the restaurant. The economic development impact has been a game changer. If you're in economic development or work with economic developers, they're always chasing those projects. They're always looking for that job threshold. When the Grumpy Rabbit opened, 55 jobs were created in the community. And I think that's a very important point to make when you want to consider the impact that investing in your Main Street and investing in historic buildings, using the tools like what we talked about today, including the historic tax credit, we can make use of these things, and those can be a big factor in making an investment worthwhile, as it was here. Ultimately, the QREs, the Qualified Rehabilitation Expenditures, total for the project was just a hair over 1.5 million, and the non-QRE total, excluding things such as restaurant equipment, landscaping, art, the aquarium that you see, all of that, totaled about 1.6. So a lot of cool things about the project. Interestingly, we talk about having a team to work on your behalf. And Amber's not here anymore, but she remembered that there was a couple of things. This is how successful and how great she was at her job. After all of it was kind of an extrapolated process last year with obviously the pandemic, and people in Washington were working from home, and it just made things take much longer than the typical 30 days. And then secondly, the woman who does the review at the federal level was actually transitioning out of her job, and they were bringing on someone new. So it was an interesting